Associate Professor and also the Head of Research at the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy here at Nelson Mandela University. And I want to warmly welcome you to our first webinar of the research program for this year. We're very excited to be hosting our postdoctoral research fellow, Dr. Olutobi Akingbade. So this is his research that he's writing up for us at the moment. So we're very excited to be hosting him and to have you join us to see what Olutobi is working on. It seems like face-to-face meetings are still some way off, and so we might as well also just sit and relax and enjoy the online experience. Just to say that we've got another webinar coming up in May that will be looking at the arts and media sectors. And we apart from the enjoyment that these sectors sometimes, particularly the arts, can provide for us, they're also absolutely essential for a functioning democracy. And we know that they've been impacted very heavily by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that webinar will actually be looking at the impact of the pandemic and how these sectors can be assisted and how they can bounce back, whether that's possible and what kind of form that would take. So please look out for that invitation. That event will be sometime in May, and then in the second half of the year, CANRAD will be hosting a conference to mark its 10-year anniversary. We were going to have it last year, but of course, as we know, the pandemic interfered. And now we have to have our 11th year anniversary, which we will do in the second half this year. So do join us for that conference. It promises to be a really great event. We will be looking at democracy from various angles. We know that democracy is under pressure across the world, and even more so now if we look at the kinds of authoritarian measures that have been deployed as part of the COVID-19 lockdowns across the world. So we're going to ask some hard questions and have various papers presented over what will probably be a 3-day conference. So do look out for that as well. But without further ado, let me hand over to our other postdoctoral research fellow, Dr. Mark Ronch, to introduce our speaker for today. And enjoy.
Thank you very much. And it's our absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Olutobi Akingbade, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at CANRAD. His research focuses on the intersection of journalism, mass media, newer forms of digital, social, and mobile media. And it further engages with frames of public health communication and questions of social justice and democracy in Africa. And Dr. Akingbade completed his master's and doctorate degrees at Rhodes University. This research is incredibly important in terms of how it engages not only with questions of South African interrogations, but also broader African conceptualizations. And we're very excited to hear Dr. Akingbade's research and to engage with that. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Akingbade now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mark, and good morning to everyone. I'm very happy to be presenting this morning, and I want to specially and warmly appreciate everyone for finding out time to join us this morning, this webinar. Now, of course, I want to appreciate my colleagues at CANRAD. Thank you so very much for the support I've enjoyed ever since I joined the team. Big thank you to the CANRAD's Director, Alan, and to Professor Christie for the leadership and the mentorship and the support. Thank you very much. Like it was rightly outlined in the invitation that was circulated for this webinar, the presentation I'll be speaking to this morning, it basically shows how a multinational beverage brand is embedded culturally and symbolically in the lives of youthful consumers drawn from South Africa and Nigeria. This presentation highlights discourses about Coke being a local drink that is likened to an older family member. This presentation, we also highlight how these perceptions and interpretations, how it feeds into the enthusiastic and habitual consumption of the sugar sweetened beverage. And first and foremost, I would like to give some sort of background and some context to why I think this piece of research work is useful, and why I think it's important to look at this particular issues from this perspective. Okay. So if I can just go to my first slide. Yes, so some background and context. I start by saying global consumption of sugar have been on the increase since the 1960s. That is no particular news. It's not particularly news, rather. We all know that there's a global rise in the consumption of sugar, and the consumption of sugar sweetened beverages plays a considerable role. It plays a specific role in the upsurge in sugar intakes in most countries. And also, some of the background information that I would like to highlight is that habitual consumption of these sugar-sweetened beverages, it's been researched over the years, and we've come to know that this sugar-sweetened beverages make a direct contribution to the sharp increase in the global average rates of obesity, diabetes, and other diet-related non-communicable diseases in both the developed and the developing worlds. Also, despite this growing awareness of diet-related NCDs, of course, there's a growing awareness now. People are beginning to become more aware that there's something like obesity out there. Last week there was still the World Obesity Day, and we had a lot of advocacy and everybody coming out to say, you know what, we need to cut down on the sugar consumption. We need to watch out on diabetes, and of course, we've seen people talking about the nexus and the intersection of that with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, of how when you have these NCDs already, you have this diet-related non-communicable diseases, you also stand at risk of COVID-19. Anyway, that's another perspective. That's another point of discussion entirely. These health conditions, according to reports from World Health Organization, they're still responsible for over 70% of deaths recorded worldwide. And of course, the statistics that points back to 2016 says 40.5 million of the 59.6 million global deaths in 2016 were due to non-communicable diseases. Meanwhile, whilst there's this growing awareness that there is diet-related NCDs, these health conditions, kills, and things like that, the global growth rate in terms of reach and market share of multinational food and beverage companies that produce these sugar-sweetened beverages and other palatable, they call it palatable and ready-to-consume products, those products are becoming more prevalent. And of course, the global rate at which they make profit, the profit and turnaround rate in terms of how they make money is becoming more evident, despite the pervasiveness of overweight, obesity, and other diet-related NCDs. And of course, in Africa specifically, and other low and middle income countries, we know whilst we are grappling with obesity, we are grappling with diabetes, at the same time we're grappling with undernutrition, malnutrition. So that makes it quite chaotic. Also, it's also important to also highlight that existing literature suggests that in recent years, much of this growth that is global, that I've highlighted there, that much of this growth rate that has been experienced by multinational food and beverage companies is now coming from Africa and other low and middle income countries. And this is happening because in the global north, in more developed climes, people are beginning to understand more about the health risks of sugar and other sugar-sweetened beverages, and this has helped to lessen. And even in some cases, we've seen that the consumption rate of sugar-sweetened beverages in the developed world is beginning to decline. It's beginning to decline seriously, and some places it's almost even stopped, because people now understand that you cannot do too much of these things, are not good for your body, and even if you can stop it totally, you should. And also there's a much better health journalism and communication in the global north about the health risks of sugar. In Africa, however, we have less resources for effective health journalism. We have fewer resources to run effective public health campaigns. And also, the targeting of the continent has been said to be attributable to the highest population growth rate that we are having in this part of the world. So multinational food and beverage companies are grappling with that, target Africa and other low and middle income countries, because they know we are having a population explosion. So they are coming this way to make up for the stagnation in the sales of their sugar sweetened beverages in the global north. And statistics begins to show how that this is gradually coming into reality, because they are now making profit at a very high rate to make up for the stagnation in the sales of and of course it's conveniently too for them to come to this part of the world to make money, because there are always usually fewer restrictions in the developing world on the marketing of such products to children. So for instance, you talk about your fast food and some other things that they are supposed to specify that this should not be sold to children. Those things we really don't, we are not at that, it's not really at the fore in terms of our communication in this part of the world. So it's easier for them to just come and market and advertise their products. And also the rapid urbanization rate is also one of the reasons why this is beginning to happen. And also the global growth rate and the targeting of Africa and other low and middle income country is also can also be seen from the perspective of what happened in the 60s when people became aware of the adverse effects of tobacco consumption. At that point, there was also a kind of turnaround in the strategy of advertising tobacco consumption and sales, because they started targeting other low and middle income countries, and multinational food and beverage companies are beginning to also use this strategy by coming to this part of the world to increase their marketing, advertising of their products, and also increase their profits. And okay, so this is a slide that speaks to the prediction years back of what will be happening in Africa, that there's going to be an expected rise. And we're beginning to see that rise in soft drink consumption in this part of the world. Okay, so the focus of this paper specifically is Coke. Is Coca-Cola as a multinational food and beverage company. And of course, there's been different articles written about it, about how they're specifically looking to this part of the world for their profits, and they are doing everything they can to ramp up investment and to make sure that they make more money in this part of the world. And so that is one of the reasons, amongst other reasons, why I decided to focus in this presentation on Coca-Cola, and also also amongst other reasons. So what I will be presenting and I'm beginning to speak about, it's a part of a larger project that I was able to carry out and eventually handed in as my doctoral thesis early last year. That was 2020, yes, early in 2020. Okay. And so Coca-Cola is doing everything they can to make more profits from this part of the world. And of course, the slide speaks to the predictions of their growth rates, which has actually happened, because they see Africa as one of the places where they can easily ramp up profit and make enough revenue that they're already losing in the global north. And also the specific focus, now let me talk about the specific focus on young Africans from Nigeria and South Africa in the study. Okay, a specific focus on young Africans from Nigeria and South Africa stems from the similar rapid urbanizations in both countries. This has been said to be accompanied by the necessity to indulge in the consumption of products that have been tagged ready to eat and ready to drink. Fast food, in other words, because it's been said in research that the more urbanized the society is, the more the rate of urbanization, the tendency for people to not have the time to actually cook proper meals. So they go after fast food, sugar sweetened beverages because they are always on the go. And that comes a tendency to just go for fast food rather than staying back to prepare and take the time to actually go for much more healthy meals. And so this multinational food and beverage company, Coca-Cola, they do that. And as a result of these, they are increasing their marketing efforts so that they can avail themselves of this rapid urbanization happening in Africa so that they can secure more loyal and addicted consumers. As sugar-sweetened beverage consumption surges in Africa, I read from the slide now, existing studies suggest that young adults are experiencing faster weight gain as they consume more unhealthy diets than any other age group. This could be related to the shift by big food companies to greater use of digital, social, and mobile media as a strategic marketing platform to target young adults who use these extensively. This is evident in the large marketing budgets and expenditures by Coca-Cola and other big food corporations that specifically target young adults. As a marketing executive at Coke stated in 2017 that the company needs to keep up its intense focus on the youth because, like I highlighted there, in quote, they are not caring about their health yet. So that's from one of their marketing gurus at Coke, because they specifically focused on the youth now, because if you come, these guys are not caring about their health yet. So we should actually target them and make sure that we get them to patronize our products. So they use digital, digital, social, and mobile media as a strategic marketing platform. So you might not be conscious of it, but you just go on your newsfeed and you just see them send you targeted ads telling you why you should go for their product and why you should actually go for more and more and more of it. And also, Coca-Cola and other companies, other big food multinational companies, one of the things they do is also try to come out with their own proof and scientific proofs in quotes that says that it is not their product that is responsible for obesity crisis, for diabetes crisis. Of course, we know they are not solely responsible, but what research are saying is that they contribute significantly to these issues, but they are doing everything to make sure that they counter these narratives and counter this information making the rounds already by trying to market their products more. And of course, there's a lot of political economy that underlies there, where they make sure the lobby politicians, they lobby everything, whether there's sugar tax or not, they still find their way to make the profits and just keep at pace. And of course, you know, they're reputable in the global in the global scheme of things. Okay. So this paper, this presentation, as it were, is coming on the premise, as I've tried to pen down here, that to mitigate excessive consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages as one of the measures to combat the increasing cases of diet-related non-communicable diseases, there is the need for qualitative studies that explore the past and current lived experiences of habitual consumers of this product in terms of their relationship with these sugar-sweetened beverages and their desire to consume this product. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that it's okay for us to do policies, to come up with policies, to come up with briefings and meetings and strategy sessions on how to mitigate the rising case of obesity and diabetes. But there's also a perspective that I think is important, that we must actually understand what is going on with the consumers. Why is this thing being consumed? Why is it popular? It is when we understand these things that we can actually come up with policies that are much more effective, because then we understand the mindset of the young ones. These companies, Coca-Cola is like an arrowhead for these companies. They know exactly what they are doing when they target young adults. So I think we should listen to young adults who consume these things, who are habitual and enthusiastic consumers of this product, to see why is the consumption rate this high, and understand their lived experiences as far as the consumption is concerned. So it goes without saying that the study is qualitative, in terms of methodology, and of course, interpretative phenomenological analysis is what I draw on in the analysis, because this approach underscores the essence and structure of exploring lived experiences of research participants as an interpretative endeavor that takes into account and emphasizes that all human beings are in a continual process of constructing, interpreting, and making sense of their world. So that's just the methodological aspect that undergirds the research. I just thought to point that out. So the participants that I got data from for this study are young adults from Nigeria and South Africa. Initially, the research started from Nigeria whilst I started my doctoral project then. And then whilst the research was ongoing, I spoke to some peers, some groups, and some other experts within the field, and they say, come on, let's broaden these things. It's a big research after all. Let's look at what is happening in another country. And that was why we now also included other spheres. And as time goes on, I'm still planning to also broaden the scope more to see what is happening in other climes. But as far as revenues of Coca-Cola is concerned, Nigeria stands out and South Africa stands out because it's one of the places where they have the highest turnover in terms of revenue. And of course, when we talk about urbanization in terms of big cities and everything, these two countries stand out. So in terms of participant selection, I went for young adults who are undergraduates, who through preliminary interviews and focus groups, I could deduce that they consume Coca-Cola. They have some sort of relationship in quotes with this sugar sweetened beverage, and they have stories and so much things to say about it. In fact, whilst talking to them, you can see the way they go about it through their non-verbal clues that they are very passionate about this drink, and they have some sort of history with the drink. So that is that's that aspect as far as selection of participants is concerned. Okay, just a quick one to just highlight the theory that underlies the analysis. So I drew on consumer culture theory. Consumer culture theory, I specifically went for this theory in analyzing because it gives some useful theorizing with which I can grapple and make sense with consumption culture in a contemporary world. So like I've highlighted on the slide, there are 4 strands with which one can actually draw on in making sense and grappling with data. They have the consumer identity projects. We have the marketplace cultures, the socio-historic patterning of consumption, and mass-mediated marketplace ideologies and consumers' interpretive strategies. Consumer culture theory sees consumer culture as a social arrangement in which the relations between lived cultures and social resources are mediated through markets. This theory also sees consumer culture as a social arrangement in which the relations between meaningful ways of life and the symbolic and materials of which they depend are mediated through markets. So this theorizing is particularly important because it gives ways to make sense of the data. Otherwise, when we have this large set of data, we'll not be able to actually speak to analyze the data appropriately and try to understand what is going on within this specific context. And also because it emphasizes the importance of lived experiences, and that is exactly what I set out to glean via the data collection and the analysis. So for instance, the consumer identity project in consumer culture theory, it places emphasis on the consumer as a recognized agent and an empowered identity seeker that draws on marketplace resources in constructing his or her own identity and meaning in order to make sense of products and environments. Also, the marketplace cultures, that's the second strand now, it speaks to consumption that is seen to have become a dominant human practice and looks at the way this dominant human practice mediates social linkages and relationships within the context of consumers' lived experiences. So because I wanted to focus on young adults in Africa, I then looked at their specific lived experience. So this theory gives me the tools needed actually to make sense of the data. So whilst I started the analysis, the preliminary analysis and the data after the data collection, one of the themes that comes out is what I've highlighted here: consumers. Okay, I've highlighted that here as Coca-Cola as one of the core of what comes out from the analysis, and that's Coca-Cola's cultural embeddedness as an SSB, as a sugar sweetened beverage. That's what I shortened as SSB there, and also as a brand. Whilst I got this while trying to establish and understand the microcultural dynamics and meanings through which the foremost engagements of the participants, the study participants, that's the young adults, I wanted to understand their foremost engagements with Coke, because what I've discovered and I've seen in some other things, in some other aspects, is that it's possible for you to collect data and you just have this superficial data that does not go in depth into the underlying reasons why the phenomenon you're trying to investigate is occurring or happening. So I wanted to go down into the history, or within the context of their lived experience, of course. How did their consumption of Coke start, and how have they come this far? Okay. The lived experiences shared by the enlisted young Africans from Nigeria and South Africa suggest that Coca-Cola as a brand and SSB has over time occupied a central place in the lives of these study participants, and it continues to maintain its centrality in their day-to-day activities. So I draw on some of the excerpts from the data. I have quite a number of them, but I just pick out some to highlight on the PowerPoint. So this is one of the young adults that was part of the focus group, the first one, for instance, in South Africa here. It says, Coke is like an older family member to me that I just grew to know. It's way before me, but I know its family. The second one that's drawn down from one of the focus groups in Lagos, Nigeria, says Coke is part of our day-to-day activities, and it's been like that since God knows when. It's almost an impossible task to trace back this stuff. I mean, do I even know? Okay, so drawing on that can begin to give us an example of the perspectives that come from the participants. Just a minute, I'm trying to get this out of my screen. I hope I can do that effectively without disrupting this. Okay, I think that might be better. Okay, so whilst these give examples of the initial conversations I had with the participants, it suggests that this young adult's relationship with the brand and sugar sweetened beverage that they have come to like and consume did not start off as a conscious thing. There is no conscious understanding of how they started to consume Coke and how they've come to just be fond, how they just come to have this fondness with the sugar sweetened beverage. They've come to like and consume it, but it did not start as a conscious thing from their earliest days as children. This provides insights useful in unpacking how these youthful Coke enthusiasts make sense of the global brand within their varying local contexts. It speaks to the position of researchers who affirm that cultural inclinations and social patterning constituted and sustained in social processes within which consuming subjects engage with market products are not necessarily a conscious phenomenon. And that is what this particular excerpt highlights. That, I mean, someone says, I don't know how I just grew up to know that Coke is always in the house. And if it's in the house, it's meant for us to drink it. We won't drink it if it's not in the house, but it's in the house. So we just drink it. We can't even remember, and that speaks to the fact that this is an unconscious phenomenon they've just grown to know. I say that, however, while the lived experiences shared by these young Africans indicate that they could not easily articulate the earliest details of how this phenomenon, which they consume regularly, had become part of their everyday lives, likening it to an older family member suggests that the enthusiasm and deference to the brand as the first choice and main beverage consumed is not necessarily or solely a means of satisfying needs as autonomous youths or reflexive postmoderns, but rather an unconscious inclination to align with a known family member. So while it says it's an older family member, so it's an unconscious inclination that it's cool to actually go with this particular beverage. Young Africans who have similar perceptions and self-understandings about Coke have the propensity to have consumer goals, choices, and behaviors that are motivated by this unconscious inclination that stems from a loyalty to a phenomenon regarded as an older family member. The reference to Coke as an older family member, which other participants also within the focus group and other focus group they also identified with it, and they also said, yes, we believe that is what this is. That is what is really happening here. That is what this is. We know this brand. It's one of us. Okay, so this reference can be further understood within the lens of the consumer culture theory identity projects, as these young Africans seem to derive some sense of who they are from their relationship with this brand. This aligns with the theorizing that people derive some sense of who they are from what they consume or desire to consume, whilst drawing on such products and resources in the marketplace to construct various narratives of identity. This young consumer's perception of Coke as an unconscious and background phenomenon that predates them and has been embedded in their upbringings also affirm the notion of it being an intergenerational brand that spans across different age groups within which it is known and consumed. While this is expected, considering that the history of Coke dates back to even 1886, and even in Africa it dates back to the 1920s and the 1940s, it is, however, pertinent to underscore the way in which the brand is ingrained in the subconsciousness of consumers from childhood. This is exemplified in one of these illustrations, in one of these examples that I've tried to put on the PowerPoint, where it is likened to the natural growth of toenails rather, and that is the third from the third participant that I highlight here, who says, for me, it's not a conscious thing. I just know I've come to believe so much in Coke. And I think it would be futile to even try to get me to recount how the whole thing began. To me, it's like you're asking me to tell you how or when my toenails grow. While the growth of toenails is a known occurrence, the process that leads to it cannot be intelligently articulated or unpacked by those who are not trained in the relevant scientific fields. This suggests that the pursuit of common consumption interest among postmodern African youths who consume Coke as a global product in their varying localized settings is cushioned by their particular African upbringings and the cultural context of which the brand is part of. This is consistent with the theorizing about consumer experiences and performative identities, that this is first a result of embedded dynamic and interactive processes, which also have the propensity to frame consumers' different horizons of conceivable action, feeling, meaning, and thought patterns. This further highlights how Coke as a product and brand has over the years become embedded as a background or unconscious brand within the cultural context of the young Africans purposefully enlisted for this study, and how this also interplays with the interactive processes that characterize their everyday actions, feelings, meanings, and thought patterns. If I can just go to the next slide now. Okay, so if you look at the next slide, it further illustrates what I'm trying to, what the concept I'm trying to foreground of how this particular beverage has become part and parcel of the livelihoods and the day-to-day activities of these young adults. The first one I highlighted on the PowerPoint says, though I'm not sure I can vividly remember my childhood days and memories with respect to Coke, it was part of my Sunday afternoons after what seems to be a long and boring church service. I also remember as a 6-year-old, I visited my dad's office often, and he always has a can of Coke at a corner on his table. I always wonder why Coke though. I never asked him, but I just think it's something cool to at least identify with. For these particular young adults and other study participants, the childhood experiences of Coke aided the recollection of certain instances in their past which they were not able to remember or which they thought were not related when we started the conversation. So when we started the focus group, initially they weren't able to recall memories. They weren't able to recall past memories of how they started Coke, and that was and the first excerpts I brought up speaks to that. But whilst the conversation was ongoing, they began to connect the dots and understand how maybe they've come to love this brand so much. These and other examples replete in the data, alongside the first-hand observations I had during field work, suggest that these young Africans, despite their varying backgrounds and societal affiliations, were able to relate to the experiences about which others reminisced. So what actually happened was, in the process of them talking during the focus group, then you started seeing people saying, okay, I can relate to that, I can relate to that. So while saying that, then they now come up with their own very long narratives of how the thing Coca-Cola has been part of their livelihoods and their day-to-day activities. Drawing on the theorizing of consumption, since this set of youthful consumers do not make the goods through which they reproduce everyday life, they unconsciously operate within the confines of available commodities as passed down to them from the older generation. This speaks to their consumption habits and value creation, which is without recourse to the fact that the companies that own these commodities, in this case Coca-Cola, are primarily interested in profit and economic values rather than their health or upholding their cultural values. The second excerpt that I highlighted that is there on this particular PowerPoint shows how this young adults' consumption of Coke resonates with the life and times of our late grandmother. Maybe I just read that quickly. Okay, she says here that apart from it being a favorite drink and brand, it is something that reminds me of my late granny who raised me in Abadas, that is a particular town in southeast Nigeria, because she's a Coke person. Coke to me is the only soft drink out there. I don't do alcoholic drinks, and it is the only beverage drink I take. This is because of the kind of initiation I unconsciously received into Coke consumption by my grandma, plus the fact that Coke represents a modern brand, at the same time an old brand that has stood the test of time. So that is a particular young adult trying to bring up her perspectives and just tell us how she thinks she's come to cherish and have a fond relationship with this particular brand. Okay, I think I must just go to the next theme that I got from the next theme that I got whilst doing the analysis. Okay, so this next theme that I'm going to highlight speaks to Coke's symbolism as a marker beyond physical consumption, and also Coke as a hegemonic brandscape. So hegemonic brandscape here speaks to a concept developed by Thompson and Assel in their project, and hegemonic brandscape simply speaks to how global brands and products exert systematic influence in marketplace cultures and in local context. So whilst going through the concept as developed by Thompson and Assel, I discovered that it's useful in actually making sense of what is happening here. So I drew on it and then did the analysis alongside. And as I come up here with Coke symbolism as a marker that is beyond physical consumption. Okay, so I have some highlights of some of the things that came up during the focus group. So if you can actually read that, it's going to give some more insights into the points I'm trying to establish. So if I read the first one, it's this is one of the participants here in South Africa, where she says, "It seemed to me then as a child that having a chilled bottle of Coke as part of my Sundays was a reward my siblings and I get for being a good girl and staying attentive during service, unlike some other troublesome kids. How I so much look forward to these Sundays as a kid." Okay, then the second one that I tried to highlight on the PowerPoint. This is from one of the participants in the focus group in Nigeria. She says, "I think the way Grandma sees things is funny, considering how Coke to her symbolizes some sort of reward for diligence. When she wants to tell me I've done something she's pleased about, she'll buy me Coke. And I think it's quite funny that I still unknowingly do that most of the time. Thinking about it now, I kind of realize that I buy Coke once I feel I've done something worthwhile." Now, this alongside a plethora of other similar narratives in the data suggest how Coke has been symbolically embodied and institutionalized among the cultural layers that underlie the current consumption of the brand by these young Africans. This symbolic embeddedness being an integral part in the lives of older generations in the families of these young Nigerians and South Africans has a potent set of meanings that has been unconsciously passed down and accepted by their generation. This set of symbolic meanings, which offer insights into background events about Coke, is in line with a theory which asserts that meaning remains a fundamental aspect of symbolic consumption and lies at the heart of consumer culture, as it is not only real, but also the understanding gleaned from it forms the primary gestalt within which consumers exist. In concert with other relevant theorizing that speaks to consumer preferences and lifestyle practices, the enjoyment, satisfaction, and different modes of identity formation that these young Africans derive from Coke is linked to how value is being created within their respective cultural spaces. Beyond consuming a can or bottle of Coke, for instance, there is a propensity for young Africans with experiences similar to those outlined in the excerpts above to operate predominantly within a particular thought pattern, where Coke has over time been subconsciously regarded as a marker that symbolizes enjoyment with loved ones and a reward for good behavior and diligence. For instance, there are participants who shared experiences similar to those cited on the PowerPoint, and this implied that during their childhood years, Coke symbolized enjoyable family time, which comes after weekly religious activities. Now, this specific sugar sweetened beverage brand is deemed fit as a reward for good behavior during religious practices, and some sort of reward for diligence indicates how the current enthusiastic consumption of Coke by this set of young Africans is underlined by the structuring influence these childhood experiences had on them. This is in line with consumer culture theories and current proposition that to understand consumers' position and choices within a plethora of products available in the marketplace, we need to examine and understand the long existing relationships between these consumers and the structuring influence embedded within their respective cultural spheres as they define themselves consciously or unconsciously by those positions and choices. I'm not sure how many minutes I have more. The earliest forms of participants' experiences and memories of Coke, such as those already cited on the PowerPoint, I've also seen them reference consumption of the brand while growing up in their households, and they've referenced the consumption of Coke as a norm or tradition that has played out before them as kids over and over again, at the instance of both the older generations in their respective households and the larger community. This has consequently set the background canvas of ideological instructions and inducements that has been unconsciously or subconsciously passed down and received by this generation of young Africans. These ideological inducements or instructions, as encoded in cultural ideals or norms, come from the interpersonal bond that this set of young adults have with Coke as the sugar-sweetened beverage and brand during their childhood days, that has been presented to them as an important part of family meals and relaxation time. And also they've seen it as an important part of birthdays, hangouts, weddings, and a reward for hard work and good behavior. Now, this brings properly to the fore the concept of the intergenerational hegemonic brandscape, which are highlighted in this particular slide. The concept of hegemonic brandscape, it's not just within their generation, it seems to be intergenerational. And this is a highly sought after apex for any consumer product to establish. So this is what most companies will like to accomplish over time. That there comes a time that a particular product becomes generational. So it goes beyond a specific generation, and then it gets handed down from one generation to the other, albeit subconsciously and even sometimes unconsciously. Okay. Because this particular excerpt from the data, alongside a plethora of others, suggests that Coke in the families of the young Africans purposefully enlisted for this study operates as a hegemonic brandscape, and it has, for multiple years and even generations, maintained a structuring influence underlined by ideological inducements and instructions within which this homogeneous set of youths function and habitually consume the SSB, the sugar-sweetened beverage and brand. So what I'm trying to do here is to just lay the background, the context within which this particular purposefully enlisted young adults consume the brand. So this excerpt I try to bring up are the understandings that underline their current habitual consumption of Coke. And when I mean habitual consumption, the people that I draw on, that I enlisted as participants for this study, are people that tell me that, we take Coke on a daily basis. We love the brand. When you have Coke, you cannot go wrong. Then I started asking, why do you think you can't go wrong with Coke? And I discovered that they're oblivious to most of the things people talk about in terms of obesity, diabetes. They cannot be bothered. Just like the marketing executive that I cited earlier on in Coke did say that they want to target young adults, and specifically young Africans, because they don't care about their health yet. They're not really aware. They don't care about health yet and things like that. And of course, I could see that resonate amongst the focus group conversations we had, because they tell me that, we're still young, let's just enjoy now. Even those that do alcoholic drinks, I discovered that they mix Coke with it, so they always still have Coke at home. So when they want to take whatever brand they take, they mix it with Coke and all other things that comes with youthful exuberance.
Dr. Akingbade, can we ask you to start wrapping up, please, so that we can engage with some of the questions in the chat?
Thank you very much. If I can just have 2 or 3 more minutes, yeah, sure. Okay, so of course, to wrap up now, it is within this context that I've tried to outline that the consumers, these youthful consumers that are enlisted in this study, it is within this concept, this context and the concepts I've tried to use to make sense of them, that they now argue and tell me that Coke is a local sugar-sweetened beverage, and it is one of the brands that they believe in. They argue and they tell me that it's their local sugar-sweetened beverage based on this context that I've tried to outline. And one of them did say, it certainly sounds funny and odd to me to see or think of Coke as foreign. It is not just an older family member. It is a solid local drink that is ours, and you can never go wrong with it. So to just wrap up quickly, I believe that if we want to mitigate the ongoing rise in cases of obesity and diabetes, we need to bring into our conversation that the conversations that we hold whilst trying to make policies and do sugar tax and other things, we must understand this particular issues so that we can know the best way to mitigate consumption of sugar-sweetened beverage that now contributes to obesity and other issues. So even if you want to take these things, then you know that you really need to lessen the way you take it, because it's not just about other things, but about your health. I think if there's any other thing I would like to bring up, then we can go there during the questions and interaction. I hope it wasn't too boring. Thank you so very much for listening. Over to you, Dr. Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akingbade. I think it was the furthest thing from too boring. I think it was a very, very fascinating engagement, and we would encourage all of those who have been listening via live stream or via Zoom to please comment in the chat so that we can engage with Dr. Akingbade's research. And we have a question from our fearless leader, Alan, who says, thanks for sharing illuminating research, Olutobi. As you analyze possible shifts with young people in South Africa and Nigeria, do you find the, quote, Coke loyalty extending to sugar-free brands and even to the problematic bottled water produced by Coke? Would you like to engage with that?
Yes, definitely. I just didn't get that perfectly. Let me just see. Okay, I can answer the question here. Okay. Yes, to a very good extent. I see the loyalty to Coke. I see it extend to what they call sugar-free brands, because what they believe is that as far as Coke is concerned, you cannot go wrong. So they extend that loyalty beyond the sugar-sweetened brand beverage itself to every other thing that Coke produces, because they believe it's one of us. It's always been. One told me, my grandma takes Coke, I take Coke, my children will also take it. You cannot go wrong with anything Coke, you know. So if you don't have it, these ones that they tell us that is sugar-free but is embedded with a lot of sweeteners that can also cause damage, they still want to go for that. So the loyalty cuts across. Yes.
It's fascinating. So there's a kind of sort of inter-brand loyalty. We've also got a question from Sonwabo Sturman. He says, thank you, Dr. Olutobi, for exploring this critical matter, especially in the context of global democracy and the global health crisis. Such research is pivotal on the agenda setting and policy implementation to account for all stages of the policy-making process and civil society's role in it. My question is, in addition to a youth perspective, how do you see the role of civil society's influence in global health policymaking, provide methodological specificity and diversity while emphasizing the importance of causal mechanisms, excuse that. I'm asking the question reflecting on what happened in India a few years ago, where mass mobilization resulted in closure of a Coca-Cola bottling factory.
Thank you so very much for that insightful comment. Thank you so very much. And yes, the role of civil society's influence cannot be overemphasized. It's high time that we encourage our civil societies to do more, because if we leave everything to our politicians and to the people are the other major stakeholders, because civil societies are also called stakeholders in this. If we leave it to others, then we might not really go far, because there's a lot of political economy that goes around there. And I'm not sure if I did mention also that Coke is doing everything they can also to whittle down the science that says their product is bad for people's health. So so money is exchanging hands. There's a lot of lobbying going on. So civil society cannot afford to whittle down their role, or to whittle down how they come up and engage with these critical issues. So all hands must be on deck by all civil societies, because like what you said, what happened in India, that is civil society at work, you know, and that is all hands being on deck, people knowing that this thing is real. And what is happening is that we are at the level of awareness that these things can be bad for our health. We are still not in the level of actually knowing that it is bad, capital letter bad, you know. We're still at that level of awareness, it's bad, you know, but I mean, it can do no harm and things like that. But the moment the civil societies themselves on this continent get to that level of knowing this is bad, there's no two ways about it. In the global north, most of them now understand these things, and it's helping them to see a decline, you know, because the future is the young adults. And if they get obesity already, if they drink so much, now obesity is on the rise, and that is the future being poisoned already. So civil societies must play their part, and the importance cannot be overemphasized. Thank you for that contribution. Yes.
Thank you. We've got a question from Dr. Glenn Holtzman. He says, this is very fascinating research. Is there any merit to the idea that older generations regarded Coke as a, quote, wellness tonic in various home remedies for stomach ailments and to prevent people from becoming faint if they had not eaten for a while? And the children associated with the idea that consumption always resulted in folks feeling good or rewarded after church. Does this play into the intergenerational or cultural embeddedness?
Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn, for that contribution and for the insights. And then, yes, you are actually spot on. And one of the things that was very surprising is the intersection and the similarity between the conversations, the focus group I had at the University of Lagos campus in Nigeria and the focus groups I had at Rhodes University campus. Because these are, and in both groups, you'll see people tell me that, you know what, even when you're sick, Coke is what you need to eat. I mean, someone told me then during the focus groups that when she was ill, she went to the hospital, she was always throwing up, and the doctor said, give her Coke. When she takes Coke, then we can give her the injection. When she drinks Coke, she is fine. So we have all those conversations that people believe that there's something about Coke that you cannot go wrong about. And of course, it plays into the intergenerational and it plays into the cultural embeddedness, and of course the feeling good factor. It's also part of it. I see part of the young adults tell me that their parents are not always around throughout the week, the dad, for instance, and when the dad comes during the weekend, one of the ways daddy is around is that then there's Coke for the weekend, and then everybody has Coke whilst watching a soap opera or something. Well, so the feel good factor is there, and unconsciously the young adults just feel that it cannot go away. So yeah, it plays into the intergenerational and cultural embeddedness. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And then we've got a question extending on this intergenerational link from Professor Christy van der Westhuizen, who says, thanks, Olutobi. The intergenerational link is an important finding. How agentic, this is just scroll down, How agentic are consumers really if consumption is so normalized as part of the ordinary everyday? They are not consuming Coke as a conscious decision by an empowered consumer after all.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that insight. And that is one of the things I'm still trying to grapple with and look into further, that when we say consumers have agency, how do we contextualize and make sense of that agency properly when consumption is already normalized and it's gone beyond the level of just even consciously knowing what you're doing. It's just taken as a given, and you're seen as part of the day-to-day activities. So they're consuming Coke not as a conscious decision, but they just take it after all and things like that. So yes, it has been so normalized as part of every day. And then that begs the question of, do they really have agency at all? To a very good extent, that is a very big question, because the agency now, it's not really there. It's not really there per se, because yes, you say you have agency, you say you have a say in what you do, because that is what they think. That is what they think is happening. They feel, we have agency, we know what we are doing. Until we started having the focus group conversations, it was then they discovered that, maybe this thing is even beyond us. Okay, we never thought about it. It's even intergenerational. Okay, so, but even at that, I can stop drinking it. I mean, you can't go wrong with it, and things like that. So yes, thanks for the contribution, Prof.
Thank you. We've got a question from Shombe Mfono. She says, they say, as a nutrition professional, what should we be doing to shift or change behavior or break the cycle if the influence is intergenerational?
Thank you so very much for that question and contribution. I think it's a conversation we all need to start having, to start telling ourselves that, how can we break the cycle? Now, that's a big question. That's a question I'm also still asking myself. And I think we can only suggest We can only keep suggesting and keep brainstorming on how to go about it. But one thing I will say is that we must be deliberate in what we do. And if we want to break the generational cycle, the advocacy must be demographically based. So we cannot just send out something on tweets meant for everybody. We must target it the way Coke we specifically target young adults. That is the way we must specifically have advocacies that is targeted at young adults. And one of the ways to do this, I think, is to look at the people they listen to. Young adults don't listen to somebody because he or she understands the science. They listen to that person because the popular artist, for instance, or is somebody that resonates with them, somebody that is like them. Then they can listen to that person. So if we can convince the popular celebrities in our society to understand this and then communicate to them, that to me is a good start, rather than just making policies. Because the funniest aspect is that in Nigeria, for instance, there are cheaper colas. So you have Coca-Cola, you have the main Coke, then you have other cheaper colas. And these young adults tell me that as long as they have money, they are going for Coke. They go to your party or they come for your event, you must start with Coke on the table. They're going to sit on, not other cheaper colas, so they keep going for that. So if you really want to break that, you have to start from the people they listen to. That is one of the ways, amongst many others, that we really need to start thinking about and how to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we've got a follow-up kind of question from Georgina, who writes, fascinating research, Dr. Akingbade. What about marketing restrictions to children? Your research looked at young adults, and they're curious about the age range, but a quick glance at their online campaigns shows school children to be the target market.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that contribution. Thanks so much. In terms of marketing restrictions to children, in the developed world, we are beginning to see, in the global north, we're beginning to see that there are specific restrictions. Well, they say you cannot market these products to children. You cannot do this to them. You cannot do that. Now, it's not very effective as it were, but at least there is there is a willingness. There's the drive to actually do that. There's a drive to make it happen. Like to say, you know what, you cannot market this thing to kids in a way that we are not even at that stage yet in this part of the world. And in terms of my research, I looked at age 18 to 22, in terms of the specific age range I looked at. And I specifically focused on that because I discovered that Coke is going for their online campaigns now rigorously. Why those campaigns target school children also, one of the papers I've read and the conversations I've had with people on the field is these young adults that freely have access to Wi-Fi, data, and all those things, because the university campus has Wi-Fi, so they get to see all these adverts more. Of course, people have other access. School children also do that also, but I think this youthful exuberance is it's really seen in young undergraduates. It's also seen in school children also, but I just chose to look at those ones because I believe they see the targeting as they are more active on Facebook, they do all those things, and they see what is happening. But also it's important to look at school children also, because they are also part of the social media world. They see all the marketing, they see everything that is ongoing, but I specifically looked at young adults. So just start from them and see what is happening in that sphere, and then see what their perspective is. I didn't even know that I would find as much as what I was able to come up with. So with time, I believe it's important to look at what is happening as far as school children are also concerned. But for this specific research, I looked at young adults from between age 18 and 24, who are university undergraduates. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have a question earlier from Simpiwe who says, thank you for a great presentation, Dr. Akingbade. Under COVID-19, we have seen a rise in health consciousness with looming prospect of sickness and even death. In this high precarious context, do you predict that there may be a change in attitude towards sugar-sweetened beverages, given the failure of instituted taxes on sugar, particularly in South Africa?
Thank you very much, Simpiwe, for your comments. In terms of health consciousness, I think it might be too early to say what will happen because we're still in the midst of the pandemic. So we see a rise in health consciousness. Yes, we'll see that. But then one of the things we're beginning to see is that people still have a mistrust for what is happening with COVID. So people still, not everybody, there are people that are now very careful and things like that. There are people that believe there is COVID, but now they've gotten to the stage where they're even tired. So yes, to some extent, we can see that it's going to lead to some rise in health consciousness. But for some people that never believed that there's anything COVID, and they believe that it's just a figment of people's imagination and things like that, to now see the relationship between that and other issues of high levels of sugar consumption and things like that, we must just wait it out to see how that will unfold. But of course, we need to remain optimistic that this looming prospect of sickness and death that we've been seeing since last year will lead to a greater health consciousness. Yeah, we have to stay optimistic, but time will tell. Thanks.
I think we're going to have the last question for the session. But if you have further engagements with Dr. Akinbade's research, do please contact him via email. I'm sure he would love engagement. This is from Beverly Gray, who says, "Thank you for your thought-provoking research, Dr. Olutobi, and an excellent presentation. Until multinationals develop a moral conscience, they will continue to promote unhealthy consumption habits instead of leading the way in changing behavior towards healthy lifestyles by changing the ingredients of their brand leaders." Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that comment and contribution. I perfectly agree. That moral consciousness, it's not there. The sincerity is just not there. It's just not there, And we need political leaders that understand what is going on, so that they can help us. When Michelle Obama was first lady in the States, she understood and she started appealing to moral consciousness of some of these leaders so that they can then begin to see some of these changes and to help people eat more healthy foods, So we need that moral consciousness on the part of these multinational companies and on the part of our political leaders too, on every facet on this continent. So when they understand that, then it can help. And of course, then you can begin to hope that, yes, things will gradually change. Thank you so much. You're very right.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Akinbade, for a fascinating presentation and for this wonderful engagement. I'm going to hand over to Ms. Lisejo Nkosi, who is our newest research intern at CANRAD, to wrap up.
Thank you, Dr. Mark Crunch. To our CANRAD team, Nelson Mandela University community, most valued invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this day. As Dr. Mark Crunch said, I'm Lisejo Nkosi, and I'm a research intern in the research program at the Center for the Advancement and Non-Racialism and Democracy at Nelson Mandela University, which is also known as CANRAD. So on behalf of CANRAD, Nelson Mandela University, and the entire supporting team, I would like to say to all the entities also presented here today that thank you for joining us today, and also thank you to Dr. Olutobi for gracing us with your important work and also sharing your findings with us. This webinar has really been thought-provoking, and something that really stuck out to me during the presentation was how a multinational brand like Coca-Cola targets certain parts of the world to make money due to the lesser restrictions in marketing these products. And the fact that social media is prevalent in this marketing has really sparked a thought in my head. And how do we make sure that these big companies aren't able to really reach young people? But because we know that Coca-Cola is like an older family that we've grown to know, and also because we do not care about our health as young people, this webinar presentation has really been thought-provoking in terms of how do we actually spark a conversation around policies, and also as civilians, how do we make sure that there are restrictions, and how do we best take care of our health as young people? I extend my thanks to Dr. Mark Ronch for the organization and the logistical support and moderating the event alongside with Professor Christy van der Witsen and Marco Fabri. I thank you, and also to our leader, Mr. Alan Zinn. We thank you. And lastly, I would like to thank the guests for being a part of this webinar. Please do join us for more of our webinars and events in the future. This event wouldn't have been able to happen overnight, so we just thank you to everyone at CANRAD and our team at Nelson Mandela University for their involvement and also willingness to make sure that this webinar happens. We thank you all for being here this morning. It has been a great pleasure. And Dr. Olutobi Akingbade, we really thank you for bringing this presentation to us. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
People can do a bit of a wave if they want to and switch on their cameras.
Thanks everyone for being part of this. Thanks so much.
Yes, it was great, Olutobi.